So do we have any, for those of you who haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Steve Loby. Welcome to Georgia RIA. Do we have any brand new people tonight? Yes? Great. Welcome. I think you're in the right place at the right time. So the program for tonight is our normal Georgia RIA stuff, and then we've got something very special we're going to introduce, and then we're going to have our panel. We're going to wrap up around 9 o'clock. Okay? All right, listen, it's my privilege to introduce this panel tonight. I think it's just a fabulous talent we have up here tonight. I hope you take advantage of it and ask questions, etc., etc. So, a couple things about this panel I want to say in general before I introduce the individual speakers. A couple of things that struck me upside the head. People, please. So we have here very, very local Atlanta-centric people, and one of the things they have in common is they all went to Georgia Tech, and the country song that pops into mind is "Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys, send them to Georgia Tech." All right, fantastic. So they're all local. They're all very enthusiastic about Atlanta. They all want to see Atlanta succeed, and these are people that are helping Atlanta to succeed, as you'll find out. Wow, all of a sudden we got some volume in. Okay. What else do I want to say about the group? I think basically that's it. So the first, I guess they're speaking in the order that, no, not quite, but now David is the first speaker. His name is David Loby. The person I feel like I've known this guy his whole life. I'm thinking I probably have, maybe even a few months before his whole life. So obviously David's my son. I'm very proud of David, not for the accomplishments we're going to get into tonight, but he's an all-around good guy, and I'm very proud of him as I have any moment with kids. So, I have some issues here. So David graduated from Georgia Tech in 2001. As I mentioned, they all graduated from Georgia Tech in one way, shape, or form. And he went and worked for Robert Childs Lessor, which was the largest real estate consulting firm, I believe, at that time. After then, he did a stint with Morsberger Group, and then he co-founded Noel Consulting with a gentleman named Tom Noel. They have grown it to 13 employees, including them. They did last year 240 projects, consulting projects. You think about that, that's like every day of the year they have a deadline. Yes. I see that. Try it. You sure it's not my voice? How's this one? Better? Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, so David co-founded Noel Consulting 10 years ago. They did 240 projects last year. They're coast to coast and all the big name developers you've ever heard of, but I asked him to just give me a quick list of what he did in Atlanta. And recently, the first thing he said was, "Dad, I've done 200 projects in Atlanta." So we had to back it off a little. So you probably heard of some of these things. In the private sector, he did Pond City Market, he did Krog Street Market, Buckhead, Atlanta, Inman Quarter. Public sector, they were the consultants on the Beltline, Fort McPherson. Is that still ongoing project? I don't know. And then Invest Atlanta. They have a little niche where they also specialize in town centers. They've done a lot of work with Atlanta, Canton, Duluth, Decatur, and Suwanee, among others. So he's going to be our first speaker tonight and shed some light on what his take is going on in Atlanta. Take it away.
I have put together a bunch of slides, which I'm sure you're not going to be able to read any of the details on here, but that's okay. I'm going to explain to you what I want you to take away from some of this stuff. As my dad mentioned, we do a lot of market studies. We look at a lot of data. We're working across the country, but I'm obviously going to talk about Atlanta for you. So to start off, everything that we do, we start with job growth. So this chart is showing metro-wide job growth that Atlanta has seen. The top here going back to '96 and sort of what's been happening here lately. So, back in the late 90s, we were a market that did 90,000 new jobs a year. We had a recession with the dot-com. We lost about 20, 30,000 jobs there. Then we had the Great Recession where we lost almost 200,000 jobs. The nice news is we've recovered very strongly from that, and we had 4 years in a row. Should I be pointing?
Yes, it should be pointing.
All right. We had 4 years in a row here, 14 to 17, where we did 80,000 plus new jobs. So that's what we're all seeing right now, the growth that's been driven from that. What that has done, if you look at this bottom chart down here, this is showing metro markets across the U.S. that have a high growth rate, but also a high absolute growth rate. So you want to be in this top right quadrant. We are among the top 5 in the nation, and really the only one that has us beat on both metrics is Dallas. So with that job growth has come population growth. Metro-wide, we've seen about 1.5% annual population growth since 2010. Pretty strong, but when we really look at the data kind of by county or by certain key cities, you see a couple of real standout all-stars. City of Atlanta being one of the top. This is the urbanization trend that we're all living through right now. 2.1% annual growth rate since 2010. And as we get new data, that's going to continue to tick up. But the other ones that are really impressive here, Gwinnett County. Gwinnett County did 1.9%, and it was almost 1 million people base, so that's pretty significant. When we look at the urbanization trend, this is drilling down a little bit and talking about just the city of Atlanta limits. But just within the city of Atlanta, since 2010, we've seen the addition of 28,000 net new households. The majority of those households, 52%, have been renters in the mostly millennial ages, 25 to 44, and actually mostly predominantly singles. So really interesting to think about, this whole thing that you always hear about millennials and going after millennials. It is extremely true. So those folks moved from within the city, so they were already somewhere and kind of moved around, created new household formation. 25% moved in from the suburbs and about 20% out of market relocation. I can tell you from seeing this on the front lines that out of market relocation has been much stronger than 20% in the past few years with all this job growth that we've seen come into our market. So what are we going to see going forward? We get job growth projections from Moody's. It's one of the most trusted sources out there by lenders, so that's why we use it. We also look locally at some economists, Rajiv Dhawan at Georgia State, for example, Mark Vittner at Wells, some different folks like that. But they're generally all saying the same thing, which is that we're looking at a recession planned to be in 2020. So why is that happening? Well, we've already seen job growth start to cool. From those 80,000 numbers, we already dropped down to the 50, 55,000 level last year and this year. Still strong job growth, it's still good, but it's not the 80,000 that we were doing. Part of that is we have extremely high unemployment right now. It is difficult for people to find employees and to continue growing at that level. Part of it's a disconnect between the skill set of the folks that are out there and the jobs that are trying to be filled. There's also automation and technology gaps in every industry, and as we get later in the cycle, you always see this. I was reflecting on this even with our industry, in my business. I've got 12, 13 folks, and we're doing 40% more work than we used to with that same group of people just because we figured out how to streamline every part of our business. Everyone's going through that, so that's part of why you're not seeing that many jobs anymore. So as we plan for that cycle correction, what is that going to mean for the market? This is Atlanta metro-wide new home sales. On the top, you see those job growth figures. There's a green line that relates them to new home sales. And then at the bottom, you have total new home sales. I stole this from a condo study we were doing recently, so it also kind of breaks out the condo market specific within that subset. But what you're seeing here is, back before the recession, Atlanta was a market where we did 50,000, 60,000 new home starts a year. And we all know after the recession, that's been a very different world. This past cycle here, 11 through 18, we've done about 13,000, 14,000. And that's about what we're going to see continue metro-wide. So while there is a correction and a slowdown in 2021, late 2020 and 2021, because of strong numbers this year and because of a pretty quick rebound that they're predicting, it should average out about the same as what we've seen in the most recent cycle. The other interesting thing, if anybody's playing in the attached space, condos or townhomes, that percentage is increasing. We're still behind where we were pre-recession, but it's coming back because of affordability issues and just having to get in with attached product in many submarkets where people want to be in. On the apartment side, the slowdown is going to be a little bit more pronounced. The apartment market's driven more heavily by job growth formation. And so, lately this is why you see all these tower cranes everywhere in the core of the city, and now all the urban developers are going out to the suburbs. We're seeing a lot more suburban apartment deals getting built in many locations where we haven't had new product come online for 5-6 years. So this most recent cycle, we've done about 5,500 new apartments per year. And going forward, we're putting that at about 4,900. So not a drastic slowdown, but you're going to start to see it. You're going to feel it. We're already seeing it on the lending environment, particularly in the urban areas. I know there's going to be a lot of questions about what areas of town should we be looking at and how do we track this. And there's so many different areas that are interesting depending on what your model is or what your niche is or who you're going after. So it's a very hard question for me to answer. But one of the things I wanted to point out, this is a heat map by census tract. The left-hand side shows the year 2000 census. The right-hand side is 2016. And this particular exhibit here is showing you percentage of folks that have a bachelor's degree or greater. So higher education. And we use this as one of our main leading indicators, so does Whole Foods, for example, of how areas are changing. And the red line on here, since I know this is very difficult for you to see, but the red line on here is actually the belt line. So to give you some kind of geographic reference point here. And what you're going to see, some of the neighborhoods here are carved out, but Grant Park, for example, went from 37% of those folks having a bachelor's degree or higher to 73% faster. Building costs increased dramatically faster than what we've seen with wage growth or household income. And so the result is, if we want to keep feeding the machine, keep putting out new development, new product, we're generally limited at those affordable price points, or whatever level you're targeting, there's some affordability cap, so we're shrinking the size of the real estate that we're delivering. So that comes in a lot of different forms. We're doing a lot more micro units, where you're maybe doing units that are under 300 square feet as a component of your multifamily development. We're doing what we call shrink the box model, where literally every unit type, whether it's a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, a 1-bedroom, we're shrinking them to levels that Atlanta has not historically seen before. We're looking at other markets like DC or New York or Chicago as models for this, and we're trying to see what people will accept. Co-living models are popping up. You're seeing a big merge between the multifamily space and the hospitality industry as well. It kind of goes along with this with pop-up hotels and apartment hoteling and concepts like this, all designed to try to keep building product while hitting these affordability levels. A couple others is just getting more efficient with construction. So we haven't seen this hit as much in the single family space, but the multifamily world is finally starting to take hold. There's examples of this going on in Atlanta. So heavy timber as a way to get away from some type 1 concrete construction costs. We're starting to see that. We've got a couple now under construction here in Atlanta, one in Atlantic Station. And then Prescient. Prescient is starting to use technology systems. We're getting better with building management, how we design buildings, how we schedule out the entire process, how we design to be as cost efficient as possible. And you're seeing a lot more multifamily buildings go up now using this to try to help still hit those price points. Another trend is we've all been focused on millennials for the past 5 to 10 years, and I know we used to hear lots of talk about baby boomers. That slowed down a good bit during the recession because a lot of baby boomers stayed put, and they were concerned about cashing out and did they have enough equity in their house to make the move. So we didn't see boomers move as much as we were expecting and everyone in the industry was talking about before the recession. But now their equity levels are back, they're comfortable. Now we're starting to see that pick up a lot. Now those boomers are starting to move back out. And so that applies to home purchasing. We're also seeing it in the rental market. We're doing a lot of 55 plus targeted rental properties. We're doing it on the luxury side. We're also doing it on the extremely affordable side. So you're going to see a lot of movement in that space here in the next 5 years or so. And I know that was a lot, but we're going to have a question period, and I'm trying to stick to my time limit, so I'm going to hand it over to Charlie now.
Hang on, I got to introduce Charlie.
There we go.
In civil engineering, my son is in building construction, by the way, and Charlie went on to get a Harvard MBA. You got to respect that, right? He's the former dean of the Board of Governors of the Georgia Institute of Real Estate. He is a managing director and associate broker of the commercial division of Keller Williams. He's been doing this stuff since 1972. I think he probably knows as much about Atlanta commercial real estate as anybody in the world. He specializes in office sales and leasing, and also does commercial land sales. He has won numerous recognitions. I mean, I was going to tell everybody there's going to be a slight change in the schedule tonight, because if I introduce these people properly, they would each have 36 seconds to speak, okay? So we can't do that. And I tend to be long-winded, as some of you know. So he won a Commercial Board of Realtor of the Year award, on and on and on, and he is currently, in addition to doing his Keller Williams jobs, I understand he's doing some consulting on his own. So look up Charlie if you're thinking about buying a commercial building, for sure. Charlie.
Thank you.
Last year when I came to visit, I talked about West Midtown and the Upper West Side. Today, I'm going to talk about Southwest Atlanta, because I think it is an up-and-comer that we need to be focused on. There are going to be 7 different focal points in addition to a couple of major employment centers that I'm going to look at, and I'm going to feature 3 of those. But I think it might be well worth your while to take notes on this before I even start. And these 7 projects, some you've heard of, perhaps not on others. Lee and White, Murphy Crossing, Pittsburgh Yards, the mall at West End, many of you are aware of that, it's been here a long time. The Met, and we don't mean the Metropolitan Opera of New York. Tyler Perry Studios at Fort McPherson, and the Georgia State Stadium and development and the surrounding Summerhill area. So let's get started. I wanted to add quickly a couple of statistics just to support David's thinking here. Unofficially, Atlanta's MSA, which actually is 29 counties, is crossed 6 million sometime in the March or April timeframe. We crossed 6 million people in our MSA, and Atlanta has likely just crossed 500,000 people. After dropping down to as low as about 415,000 in the early 70s, it's been slowly coming back, and this influx of millennials that David's been referring to have had a lot to do with that. So let's get started. The economic engine slide after this one. Right now, they're in the process of spending the first billion of a $6 billion budget over the next 15 years. Many of you have seen the new canopies that have been put in place, which will be enhanced by walkover pedestrian bridges to try to get the foot traffic off of the driveways. Here are some statistics about Hartsfield Airport in particular. It is a center for 63,000 employees. Now those are in airline, ground transportation, concessions, security, federal government, City of Atlanta, and airport tenant employees. But 63,000 people are working at Atlanta Airport. It's an economic jewel of Georgia with a $34.8 billion economic impact. Since 1998, it's been the busiest airport in the world. Now that is in enplaned passengers, either coming or going. There are several airports that actually have more flights, but when you talk about passenger traffic, we're still number 1. Hartsfield-Jackson has 150 destinations, more than 75 international destinations, 50 countries. 275,000 passengers a day, 2,700 arrivals and departures. That's more than 100 planes per hour on 5 runways. Within 2-hour flight time of Hartsfield Airport is 80% of the population of the United States. If you draw a circle for 2 hours, it would go from Boston, include Chicago, come close to Denver, go all the way down to Miami, 80% of the population of the United States within 2 hours. 6.8 million square feet within the complex, 192 gates, 34,000 parking spaces. Quite an operation. And of course, you're all very familiar with the impact of the Beltline, but and this was a difference of 5 years. This is over on the East Side Trail. These are the same locations, 5 years apart. Here's the Beltline, and the darker green, heavy emphasis here are the sections of the Beltline that are currently active. And what I want to focus on is this portion down here on the southwest side. I won't go read for you all the details of the Beltline, but as many of you know, this was a project designed by Ryan Gravel as a master's thesis at Georgia Tech when he was a student there. It was his idea of rails to trails, and it got the support of some of the members of the city council and eventually became a reality. I'm going to step up just for a second here. I want to talk about some of the South Side Beltline related. This is the Beltline coming right through here, okay? As it's open today. This portion, whoops, David, excuse me, shooting you. Car coming across here, this is called the South Side portion. This is not open yet. But the projects, this is Lee and White. It's 500,000 square feet and 14 buildings, and I'll show you pictures of that. This is the mall at West End, just off I-20. This is the Met, which is between Metropolitan and Murphy Avenue. This is Murphy Crossing, which is a project sponsored by the Beltline itself. And this is Pittsburgh Yards, which is a property owned by the Annie E. Casey Foundation. Mrs. Casey was the mother of Jim Casey, who was the founder of UPS over 100 years ago. And their commitment is to improve the communities where people are economically disadvantaged. And they have major plans for that property. One other property that I'm sure you're well aware of the impact is the Georgia State Stadium, which is the old Turner Field, and all of the activity that's going on just above that between the stadium and the campus on the other side of I-20, and the effect that that's having on the Summerhill neighborhood. Well, let's talk about one of these projects. This is Lee and White. This is Lee Street going south out of downtown Atlanta with MARTA and rail lines right here. This is White Street. This is a complex of 500,000 square feet and 14 buildings, and it has some very interesting tenants. If you want to enjoy adult beverages, this is the place to go, okay? This is adult beverages on steroids. I mean, here we have, up here we have the Banyan Roots Brewery. We have Due South Pickles. Now that's a little bit, but we got Golda, Honeysuckle, Wild Heaven, ASW, Monday Night Brewing, and several major restaurants have since been added as well. And this is a very active center of activity on the south side. The Mall West End has gotten very dilapidated over time, and Brian Gravel, whose original concept as a master's student was the Beltline, and several investors are talking about taking over the Mall West End and creating a whole new center of activity. And this is what their concept would include. Just, it would be some of the retail aspects of Avalon on a much smaller scale, without the office buildings but just an outdoor center as opposed to an indoor mall. This is the Met. This was originally the Candler Smith warehouses built over 100 years ago. It's 1 million square feet of space. And, oops, sorry, got a little ahead of myself. 1 million square feet of space right here. This is the West End MARTA station. The mall at West End would be right over here. And this is a project being developed by Carter, which I started with in 1972. And it's a really major functioning effort. This is a rendering of some of the activity centers that they perceive. And this is an interior shot of this is an existing loft residential space. They also have office space as well that they are developing. It's a mixed-use development. It's an adaptive reuse of 1 million square feet of warehouse just south of the city of Atlanta. And as you go back here and you see right here, here's the high-rises of downtown Atlanta right here. It's got MARTA at the West End MARTA station right here. And in addition to that, we had the 4 other projects in an answer period. So let's go to Jennifer.
Once again, I do the easy part. So Jennifer Ball, oh my gosh, her title is Vice President of Planning. I think, are the slides in this order? Oh, we can do that. Vice President of Planning and Economic Development for a nonprofit called CAP, Central Atlanta Progress. And as the title implies, she directs urban planning and economic development for downtown Atlanta. Guys, if it's happening in downtown Atlanta, she's driving it. I mean, it's just amazing. So recent initiatives under her direction include an ongoing $40 million improvement to existing public spaces. That's just a little ongoing thing. She's in charge of the Atlanta Streetcar Development Plan, the Downtown Atlanta Master Plan. She has a BS in Architecture, Masters in City Planning from Georgia Tech. She's responsible for what's going on in the Arts and Entertainment District. And this blew me away, Stitch. She's working on Stitch. And, you know, I'm an OTP guy. I don't know what Stitch is. So I Googled Stitch. So I am now an expert because I saw the 2-minute video. Fantastic video. So, you know, you could straighten me out. But what I got out of Stitch was
that David and Charlie have been talking about. So my organization is dedicated to that work. We are the business organization for downtown. We leverage public-private partnerships and focus primarily on the quality of life and the economic vibrancy of downtown. We also manage something called a community improvement district. You've probably seen these organizations that work around the region, both like Perimeter Center here at Cumberland, and so we work with commercial property owners through that district to fund a lot of the work that I'm going to talk about this evening. So when I talk about downtown, it's a pretty distinct geography of the city. Bounded, it's about 4 square miles. Our residential population in this area right now is just at like 27,000 people. That's the same population as the city of Decatur, and generally the same amount of space. So it's North Avenue on the north, Boulevard over to the east. That's Memorial Drive I-20 on the south and Northside Drive on the west. So sort of that commercial core right in the heart of the city, where the interstates converge, where the MARTA system converges. And really, for us, it's the center of the city. It's the postcard shot. It's the blimp shot. The things that Charlie pointed out, you know, where the high-rise buildings are. That's really an important identity for not just the city, but our entire region. We're a bustling business district. Currently, thanks to that recovery, we're at about 150,000 jobs that occur in that area. We're a unique national destination. Depending on whose count you believe, there's somewhere around 40 million people who are coming to visit downtown Atlanta in any given year. They may be coming to a convention, they may just come to the aquarium, they may be coming to an event at the stadium, but that drives really a lot of economic activity. But last but not least, and I apologize I got cut off just a bit there, really we're a thriving, equitable neighborhood. More and more people are living downtown, they want that lifestyle, and that's really a priority for us to sort of capture this growth in residences. We've been having a bit of a moment, and your real estate is cyclical. You heard sort of David's presentation in particular. And the downtown submarket often recovers a bit more slowly than some of the other ones. So we're often, after the recession, maybe didn't get as quick a start as you may have heard about in Midtown or downtown, Midtown or even Buckhead. But now, if you check out, you can see a complete investment map, sort of a clickable map with all photos of all the projects that really at this point, we've seen over $5 billion come online in the past 3 years. A big billion of that was Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But there's another $6 billion in the pipeline. Some large projects, not unlike the ones that Charlie mentioned, that does include the Summerhill redevelopment, but also the repositioning and redevelopment of underground Atlanta, and the Gulch as well. So pretty significant momentum across all different sectors. So whether that is investment at Georgia State University, new housing, restaurants, it's a little bit of everything. A lot of that is predicated, just like David said, on job growth and being a place where people want an office that's convenient and affordable place for businesses to grow. And our office market in downtown is as healthy as it's been in a decade. And so we see, as David described, that's probably not going to go quite as quick, but some of the fundamentals about space and the accessibility and what employers are looking for that are very easy to find in downtown Atlanta. We're repurposing older buildings, adaptive reuse model, and really attracting new tenants, both from around the region, but also growing small entrepreneurs that are graduating from Georgia State or Georgia Tech, the AU campuses, and want to stay in Atlanta. That unique destination, I hope you heard that we opened a stadium, and it's been pretty busy ever since. It's hard to miss. But if you, and this says, I noticed this still says Phillips Arena. Please don't tell them I forgot to update this, say State Farm. We renamed things too. It keeps us on our toes. But if you haven't been to the arena lately, another $50 million renovation that is attracting new energy and investment there. The Georgia Aquarium is completely under construction. If you haven't been by there, they're building a new predator exhibit. New restaurants. The Masquerade is a great new spot if you want to come catch a show downtown. They have completely renovated a huge space in underground Atlanta. Hotels, we continue to grow. Hotel market is having a bit of an upswing as well. Highest revenue per night rates that downtown has seen in my career, which is longer than additional hotel growth, primarily in the flags that aren't already downtown, so smaller boutique limited service, but for the 1,000 rooms, the Cigna Hotel that will deliver at the Georgia World Congress Center in the next few years is a flagship or lead hotel that will continue to underpin that visitor market, conventions and meetings coming to downtown. And this one got really messed up. I'm so sorry that you can't read it. I think we had a little bit of a font problem. But I mentioned the neighborhood, and so obviously most of the downtown housing is in multifamily units. We do have some townhomes. In that area that I showed you, there are some single-family homes as well along the edges of Grant Park and the old Fourth Ward neighborhood. But as I mentioned, we are a little bit later to recover on the housing side than our neighbors to the north. And so we are still seeing really strong demand, high rents, in the multifamily space. David mentioned some of the trends. Frankly, this building called The Generation, it's the middle one here, if I can get this to work. This building actually used that prescient system that he mentioned. It went up in like a day. It was pretty amazing how quickly they topped that out. Some of these smaller projects, like I mentioned, this is in the Castleberry Hill neighborhood. If you've lived in Atlanta for a long time, you know the Norfolk Southern buildings, or the old Southern Railway buildings that sit right on the edge of the Gulch. These are completely under renovation as well. All the windows are out, and they're working hard to bring those back online. So really continuing new ground-up residential, as well as adaptive reuse, is continuing to drive another several thousand units in the next few years. And we're putting this missing the picture of the gulch too. I'm sorry. So I couldn't. Oh, it just wanted. It just has some hidden. What is that called? Anyway, yes, animation. Thank you. So you guys are in the real estate industry, and so you really couldn't turn on the television or open a newspaper or read a real estate blog and not hear about the Gulch project really in the past year. But a pretty transformational once-in-a-generation project of a developer who has assembled around 60 acres of land that has really never been redeveloped since the rail lines were developed in this area of downtown at the beginning of our city, but also worked through air rights that had been acquired, worked through all of easements. They bought the bulk of the site from Norfolk Southern themselves, including the Southern Railway buildings that are now under construction. And so that team, CIM, is in the process of now moving forward with all the hard work that Robert will talk about in a second, all the hoops developers have to jump through in the city of Atlanta, and specifically downtown, to redevelop a site of this size and magnitude. They have development rights up to 12 million square feet by right. This sits right on top of two different MARTA rail stations and is completely connected into the core of downtown. So there will be a predominant, with mixed use, predominantly commercial. They are retail and some residential as well. I couldn't talk without mentioning the fact that we are reinvesting in all the infrastructure that supports all of this growth and development. The infrastructure investment is what drives real estate growth, the ability to access the site, whether that's by a road, a sidewalk, or a MARTA rail, buses. And in the city of Atlanta, voters had approved, I guess it's about 2 years ago now, both a half-cent sales tax that will continue to invest in rail and transit infrastructure in partnership with MARTA in the city of Atlanta. That means continued growth of the streetcar system, as well as rail station enhancements and enhanced bus service. We also approved a 4/10 of a penny sales tax just for transportation. Things like paving streets, fixing sidewalks, the kinds of things that make moving around and living a lifestyle that's not entirely dependent on the automobile in the core of our city easier and more accessible. All of those projects are moving forward as we speak, and will transform a lot of the sites that Charlie mentioned as well. So here's my 2 seconds on the Stitch, but go to stitchatl.com, and it's about 2.5 minute video that really paints the picture of a project that we are working on to really move toward the future. The notion that as we continue to attract growth to Midtown and downtown, there's a portion of our city really right around the Emory Midtown Hospital campus, just north of the Hyatt Hotel, if you know that slide. There's really a very large vacant building that sits right on the downtown connector called the Medical Arts Building that most people seem to think of when they think of the Stitch. That we have been doing the planning work with the State Department of Transportation, MARTA. There's also a MARTA station, the Civic Center rail station sits right here on a project that would essentially cap over about 3/4 of a mile of the downtown connector and create open space and more connected street grid to create places to attract new development. We are in the very early phases of the project, but working through all of the pre-development, technical and financial feasibility to move this forward in the next 3 years. One thing I wanted to mention, and Robert will tag team a little bit on this, one sort of tool in our toolbox, we work very closely with the City of Atlanta, their Development Authority and Invest Atlanta on tools that help make investing in the core easier. And there is actually a new federal program. The word opportunity zone is so overused. There's state opportunity zones, there's local opportunity zones, but this is the federal opportunity zone, which is really essentially a federal tax program that allows investors to either delay or defer capital gains on any type of capital gains that they are realizing by investing them in pre-qualified funds that are investing in real estate and businesses in targeted census tracts. So you have to work through approved tools but target investment to census tracts. And it just so happens that downtown Atlanta, a big swath of the core of our city, is in an opportunity zone, as are many of the areas that Charlie mentioned in the south and west areas of our city. But what it is doing is effectively channeling new investment dollars into projects where investors want to take advantage of that tax benefit. And so for us, our opportunity is how do we make investing in those places attractive? And how do we attract that capital to projects that will not only help the projects move forward, but have a positive impact on the community? This, as it was first envisioned by folks wiser than us in Washington, D.C., was the notion of, yeah, exactly. Did somebody laugh out loud? Is to help, the census tracts that are approved are census tracts that have lower, higher unemployment, lower incomes, areas that are not getting their fair share of the market capital. So the goal here is not just to help projects move forward, but do that in communities that need that investment. And so my organization, along with really a host of folks around the region, have put together a prospectus where you can look census tract by census tract, see the basic details about that tract, as well as existing projects that are in the pipeline and how to connect to those projects and to those developers. And so that has been happening not just at the City of Atlanta level, but at the regional level with support from the Atlanta Regional Commission, the Metro Atlanta Chamber. It may be, if you are looking for investment capital, another way to find investors that are looking to invest in communities that you may already be working on. And I think Robert's going to talk about one of those too. So that's it for me.
All right.